My best friend unexpectedly got pregnant and came to rely on me. I wanted to turn her away, but my soft-hearted mother took her in. Just before the birth, I discovered a shocking connection between the baby and my father. I planned to kick her out and persuade my mother to divorce. But my mother was so infatuated with my father that she turned on me, tattled to him, and devoted herself to my friend, all for the sake of having a grandson. After my friend gave birth to a son, my mother, in an attempt to appease my father and pave the way for the child, sold me to a sleazy real estate tycoon as a mistress. I was brutally beaten to death. When I opened my eyes again, I saw my mother, who had just caught my friend and father, crying to me. I said softly, "Mom, just bear with it a little longer. Dad will definitely come back to you. He's cheated on you many times, but he only loves you." 1. I drank the milk my mother handed me, and my head started to feel dizzy. It was then that I realized she had drugged it. Elena, my mother, looked at me with teary eyes and said, "Ruby, for the sake of my future happiness, please become Justin's mistress. He's rich, you won't be at a loss." "And what about my future happiness?" I struggled to walk out. She suddenly grabbed me and knelt down. "Ruby, Ivy gave birth to a little brother, and your father, under your grandmother's influence, wants to divorce me. You know I can't live without your father. I love him so much. But your father said that if you become Justin's mistress, he'll consider not divorcing me. Please, Ruby, I'm begging you." I couldn't breathe and collapsed onto the bed. Seeing that I couldn't move, my mother quickly wiped away her tears and left the room. A middle-aged man with a large belly entered. It was Justin. He approached me with a lecherous look. "Please leave me alone." My words were interrupted as he forcefully tore open my clothes. He mounted me, and I held my breath, trying to suppress my disgust. I stared blankly at the direction my mother had left, too terrified to even cry. "What a waste, make some noise." He slapped me across the face. I bit my lip until it bled, and I felt like a lifeless corpse at the mercy of others. And so, betrayed by my own family and violated by a stranger, I died on that bed. 2. I opened my eyes again to see Ivy, my best friend, standing at the door, pregnant and mocking us. My mother was sitting on my bed weeping. For a moment I was dazed. The pain of my previous life was still fresh in my memory. The next second I calmed down. I had been reborn, so I wouldn't be soft-hearted anymore. At this time in my previous life, my mother had just entered the room and seen Ivy and my father flirting on the bed. She had cried to me just like now, "Ruby, please persuade Ivy, okay? Tell her not to monopolize your father and to leave after giving birth. Your father is always cheating on me. I'm so miserable." At that time, I had argued with Ivy over this information and persuaded my mother to divorce. As a result, my mother turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. She told my father that I was jealous of Ivy having someone to love and that I wanted to kick Ivy out of the house. In the end, my grandmother came from my hometown and took care of my mother and her unborn grandson, while I was kicked out of the house. Returning to the present, I turned around and gently wiped away my mother's tears. "Mom, just bear with it a little longer. Dad will definitely come back to you. After all, you and Dad have been together for so many years. He's cheated on you so many times but still comes back home. He loves you the most." My mother nodded after hearing my words, then glanced at Ivy standing at the door. "You're such a good daughter, Ruby." "And Ivy." I immediately stood up and helped Ivy to sit down. "Look at me, Ivy. You're pregnant. How can you stand for so long? Come and sit down." Ivy frowned, as if she couldn't believe that I would be so easy to talk to. "You're not mad at me?" I smiled and held her hand and my mother's hand together. "Dad has both of you to love. I'm very relieved. Why should I blame you? You can give me a little brother in the future, so our family will have a successor. I'm so happy." 3. At dinner that night, my father, Caleb, looked at us with satisfaction. "Ruby has grown up and knows how to take the burden off her father and mediate the family. I think it's time for her to get married." I stopped eating halfway. "So he couldn't wait any longer, huh?" In my previous life, it was only after Ivy gave birth that he thought of paving the way for her child by sending me to Justin. Now Ivy is still 3 months away from her due date. I looked up at Caleb with a puzzled expression. Dad, I don't want to leave you and Mom yet. Once I get married, I'll belong to another family. I want to make more money for my little brother. Caleb called good several times in a row, then happily said to my mother, Elena, our daughter has grown up, and it's all thanks to your good teaching. My mother looked at me with joy, and then shyly lowered her head. Caleb changed the subject and stroked Ivy's belly. He said to Ivy, Your belly is getting bigger. I'll have my mother come from the countryside to take care of you. In my previous life, after my grandmother came, she took care of Ivy while secretly beating and scolding me, saying how I was not a boy, that I was a useless girl, and that I should hurry up and go out to earn money for my future brother. I couldn't help but retort. As a result, I received a slap from my father. While hitting me, he scolded me for disrespecting my elders. My mother also resented me, saying, It's all your fault for not being a boy. You can't keep your father's heart. What's the use of having you? My life is so miserable. Thinking about this, it seems I need to move out as soon as possible. 4. The next day, I packed my bags and left. My father happened to be going out. Looking at me, he said, Where are you going, a girl running around like that? Are you fooling around with some wild man? I suppressed the anger in my heart and replied with a sweet smile, Dad, the company has overtime, and it's more convenient for me to live outside and work overtime, so as not to disturb my brother. Besides, my money will still be given to my brother in the future. I finished speaking and looked at him with a worried expression. He was surprised for a moment, then nodded and told me to go quickly and not be late for work. I sneered and moved into the small apartment I had bought with my own money. That night, Elena called me. I frowned and answered her call. Mom, what's wrong? Her urgent voice came from the other end. Ruby, where are you? It's so late and you're not home yet. Ivy needs to take a bath. Come and help her. You used to do it, I don't know how. Ivy had just become pregnant not long ago and found me. She cried and told me, Ruby, I have no parents, and I can't take care of a child alone. Besides, I'm so big now and it's inconvenient to do anything, and no one wants me to work. Then go find the child's father? What is he doing? You're pregnant out of wedlock. Ivy looked at me painfully and said, I was raped, but I don't want to abort the child. We had agreed before that you would be the child's godmother. You can't just ignore it. I was still hesitating after all. Agreeing meant earning money for 3 people. Then go to the police, go to court, and besides, the child's father has a criminal record. He will be looked down upon by others. As a result, my mother listened and accepted Ivy into our home with sympathy. She also said that if the child was a boy, Ivy couldn't raise it herself, so she would give it to me and be a companion for me in the future. From then on, I was forced to accept Ivy living in my house, and my mother took good care of her. But Ivy and I were also best friends for many years, and I would help her with her daily life whenever I could. But I didn't expect that the child was actually my father's, and she came to my house just to make my mother divorce. Thinking of this, I immediately said with difficulty, Mom, I still have to go to work. She is stable now. She can wash herself. If it really doesn't work, you can help. You'll get used to it after doing it once. After saying that, I hung up the phone before my mother could continue, and then I blocked her. 5. I was busy revising documents in my office when I heard a commotion downstairs. The security guard downstairs rushed into the office and asked anxiously, Who is Ruby? I looked up in confusion. That's me. The security guard immediately ran up to me and pulled me to leave. Come down quickly. There are people downstairs who claim to be your grandmother and mother making a big fuss, and they won't leave no matter what. Everyone in the office focused their attention on me. I pursed my lips, realizing something was wrong, and immediately ran downstairs. Before I got close, I heard Elena crying and live streaming on her phone. I'm such a sinner. I raised my child with great difficulty, but my daughter blocked me and won't even talk to me. I just want her to come back and help me take care of me. And she even yelled at me. My husband is also cheating. He often doesn't come home. And his mistress even came to my door. And my daughter even advised me to get along well. At this time, the live stream was full of people scolding me for being unfilial and having the wrong values. They said my mother was so pitiful, and the mistress was hateful. Of course, I didn't know any of this. I always thought my mother was just infatuated, but I didn't expect her to know everything. She was just a puppet master who betrayed me. My grandmother was also rolling on the ground and throwing a tantrum. What did our family do to deserve this? We don't have a grandson and are going to die without an heir. And our granddaughter is unfilial. We finally had a grandson, but she wants to drive him away. I, an old woman, can't live anymore. I frowned and stepped forward to pull my grandmother up. Have you had enough? The ground is cold, get up quickly. But my grandmother refused to get up, and she even pretended to pull me down with her. I quickly let go of her hand, and my grandmother fell backwards, landing on the ground. She kept mumbling. The granddaughter I raised so carefully actually wants to kill me. Girls are going to marry into other families, and she doesn't come home before she gets married. I don't know which man she ran off with. She doesn't come home or give any money. How did our family end up like this? At this time, many viewers were attracted to the scene in the live stream, and all came in to scold me, even telling me to die. Many people were also watching. My mother saw so many people. She squeezed out a few tears, squatted down and helped my grandmother. But she said to me, "Your father and I supported you through school and found you a good job. We just wanted you to have someone to rely on in the future. But you don't give us any money, and you don't come home. You have such a cruel heart." My father was one of the few successful people in the village and had built his own career in the city, but he was not considered a threat in the eyes of the wealthy families. My father was also very ambitious, so he used all kinds of means to climb the social ladder. At the same time, he was also fascinated by the glamorous world, forgetting his wife at home, and things like cheating and picking up girls at parties were endless. My mother had her heart set on my father, and my father didn't have time to care about me, and he had even less education for me. But the biggest reason was that I was a girl, and they said that girls didn't need to study that much. I couldn't help it. I grabbed her phone and turned off the live stream in her hand. I found my own job. I paid for my university tuition myself, and my living expenses came from my part-time job. I will give you a fixed amount of money in the future. What else do you want? At this time, my grandmother saw that it was almost enough, patted the dust off her body and stood up, looking at me provocatively. You must give us all your salary. You girls will marry eventually, and the money will belong to your husband's family, so we will lose out. Or you can just quit your job and go back home waiting to get married, and you can get a high dowry. 6. I was so angry at her words. Not work? If I don't work, then I'll have to spend my dad's money. Ivy hasn't given birth yet. What will my brother spend after I've spent it all? If that's the case, then that's fine. My grandmother's face changed immediately. Then you go to work. My grandson needs the best. How can you take it all away? You should give your salary to us. At this time, my supervisor came over and said to my grandmother, "You're affecting our work here. If you keep making a fuss, Ruby will have to quit her job and won't have any money to give you, so go back. Don't worry, she will give you money." After saying that, she gave me a comforting look. I took a deep breath and said to them, "You're both here. Ivy is about to give birth. What if something happens to her alone at home? What will my brother do? Please go back quickly. I will send you money on time." My grandmother was reminded by me and immediately pinched my mother's arm. "How could you forget about this, you little bitch? You can't give birth to a son, so you're jealous of Ivy's pregnancy, and you want my son to be childless for the rest of his life, right? Hurry back." After they left, I was about to explain when my supervisor patted me on the shoulder. "You'd better not come tomorrow." I looked up at her in surprise. "Supervisor, I promise this won't happen again." She smiled. "Don't be nervous, we're all women, I understand. I mean, you can work from home, so you can improve your efficiency and avoid the limelight for now. I'll tell the company that you've stopped checking." I bowed gratefully to my supervisor and returned to my office to pack up my unfinished documents and go home. This farce was over, but under my mother's distorted live broadcast, countless online users were attacking me with insults. I was too busy to check, and I didn't know that someone had started to dox me. I returned home, and it didn't calm down for a while. My mother came to me crying again. It turned out that Ivy had given birth to a boy. In my previous life, when my mother found out it was a boy, she was still happy that Caleb's family finally had a male heir, and she didn't have to be under so much pressure when my father proposed a divorce. Because Ivy had deceived my father, saying that if the child was born and the parents did not have a proper relationship, they would be gossiped about. So she urged my father to divorce Elena. My mother was reluctant, but my grandmother was so patriarchal that she would never allow her grandson to be criticized. And she also persuaded my father. Seeing that she was isolated and helpless, my mother thought of Justin, my father's business partner. So she proposed sending me to be Justin's mistress to promote cooperation and give her brother a better life. Elena took the initiative to do this, on the condition that they could not get a divorce, and my father readily agreed. Thinking back to this, I turned to Elena and said, "Mom, why are you here? Who is taking care of Ivy?" She looked at me with sorrow. "Ruby, can you help Mom? Mom only has you now. Go ask Ivy if she can let me raise the child." 7. You're overestimating me. Ivy is no fool. She's waiting to use the child to get something out of my father. I raised an eyebrow and pretended to be troubled. "Mom, I'm afraid this is going to be difficult. You know how infatuated Dad is with Ivy recently, and she'll definitely want to spend more time with the child after giving birth. Then what should I do? Your father's heart is no longer with me. I feel so insecure, and I can't get pregnant now, Sai." Elena started to cry. If it were before, I would definitely have persuaded my mother to divorce, because I have always believed that no one can be relied on except myself, and I couldn't bear to see my mother suffer. But now things are different. Not only do I not persuade her, but I want her to find ways to coax my father back. "Mom, go back first. If I have a way, I'll tell you." "I won't go, or else you come home with me and marry a good man, and Mom will feel at ease. Or you can write this house in your brother's name, and your father will definitely be happy." Her eyes lit up as she said this. I knew what she was thinking. She was definitely trying to use me to please my father. When I was a child, she deliberately poured hot water on me, just to get my father to come back and take a look. I still have a scar on my thigh. I frowned but still said, "Mom, if you don't leave, Ivy won't be able to find you and will definitely complain. And I won't be able to work either. The money I earn now is all for my brother. Don't even mention this house. I will definitely give it to him when he grows up." In this way, I half coaxed and half threatened my mother out of the house. But when I went into the house, I actually saw someone secretly taking pictures of me. I thought I had seen wrong. When I opened my phone, I saw many text messages, and even some threatening ones. "Heartless woman, you deserve to die a miserable death." The next day when I went out, I saw someone throwing dead rats at my door, and there were insulting words written in red pen. I was still thinking about who did it when my supervisor called me. "Ruby, did you offend someone? Now the company's website and phone are being flooded, and the internet is full of people saying you're an ungrateful daughter. You should come out and respond. Now the company has suspended your work, so you can take a break." I quickly apologized to my supervisor and opened my phone to find the news. It turned out that after Elena left my house, she posted another video. It was actually the recording of that day, but she had modified her own words. Now it showed that Elena was asking me for help, but I helped my friend instead and persuaded my mother to serve her, and also said that I had cut off contact with my mother and would not support her. I felt my head buzzing as I looked at the information. She had posted a lot of complaints about me these days, but she would either explain or delete anything slightly negative about my father. It seems that I can't just react passively anymore. I have to fight back. 8. Looking at the time, they should be eating dinner at home right now. I immediately took a taxi home and started a live stream at the door with the title "My Bizarre Family." My mom opened the door and looked at me happily. "Ruby, why are you back? We were just discussing your marriage at dinner. You should come and listen too." As I walked inside, I pretended to be happy and looked at my mom. "Just do whatever you want. You and Dad will definitely not wrong me." At this moment, Ivy pulled me over. "Ruby, the man your dad introduced to you is very rich, So you have to take care of us more in the future. Didn't we agree to share the good and the bad? I affectionately grabbed her arm, and to make sure the phone in my pocket could hear it, I emphasized, "Of course I won't forget my best friend. After all, you helped me take care of my dad and even gave me a little brother, so my mom is much more relaxed." My dad was also sitting next to Ivy, with his arm around her shoulder. I always knew Ruby was the most sensible. Then he took my mom's hand. "We are such a happy family." Looking at my dad immersed in his happy joy, I asked with doubt, "Dad, where's the baby? Why don't I see him?" Grandma came out with the baby in her arms, and I immediately took him over to look at him. I looked at the baby and then at my dad. "Ivy, this baby's mouth and nose look like yours. We said you would be the godmother, but now it's not possible. However, this child doesn't look like my father. He looks more like Nathan." Nathan was Ivy's ex-boyfriend, and they had a very intense relationship before breaking up. Ivy's face changed when she heard that, and she hugged the baby. "What are you talking about? The baby is so young. How can you tell who he looks like? But if you want to be closer, you can call me Mom too." I felt a wave of helplessness. At this time, many viewers joined the live stream. Wow, this is too explosive. What did I just hear? My best friend seduced my dad and wants me to call her mom. This woman is shameless. And someone else said, "That voice sounds like the ungrateful daughter from a few days ago." 9. La abuela, al ver al bebé, comenzó a llorar y rápidamente urgió a Ivy a entrar y amamantarlo. Sin embargo, Ivy se negó, alegando que amamantarle causaría flacidez en los senos. Comenzaron a discutir acaloradamente. Aprovechando que nadie me prestaba atención, me escabullí por la puerta. Desde afuera, vi que el número de espectadores en la transmisión en vivo había superado los 100.000, y casi todos los comentarios eran de odio, similares a los que había recibido antes. Sonreí con ironía. Esto era solo el principio. Jugueteando con el cabello de mi padre y del bebé, pregunté, ¿son realmente padre e hijo biológicos? Luego, le entregué los cabellos a un amigo para que los analizara. Al mismo tiempo, me puse en contacto con Nathan y obtuve una muestra de su cabello. Al regresar a casa y revisar mi teléfono, descubrí que alguien había comparado la grabación de mi transmisión en vivo anterior con la grabación en vídeo de Elena. Los resultados de la comparación mostraban que se trataba de la misma persona y que yo era la protagonista en ambos casos. La opinión pública en línea comenzó a cambiar. Algunos insistían en que yo era una ingrata y continuaban insultándome, mientras que otros afirmaban que toda mi familia estaba enferma, que mi madre sabía del adulterio de mi padre pero no se divorciaba, y que yo solo había intentado protegerme a mí misma. Mientras revisaba las noticias, mi amigo me informó que los resultados de las pruebas de ADN estaban listos. Había 2 pruebas, ambas confirmaban que el bebé era hijo de Nathan, no de mi padre. Mi padre había estado criando a un hijo que no era suyo. Pensando en lo orgulloso y machista que era mi padre, me moría de ganas de ver su reacción al conocer esta noticia. 10. It was a weekend, and I chose to return home around lunchtime. The reason was simple. More people would be watching the live stream at that time. I turned on the live stream again, made sure it wouldn't slip, and entered the house. I saw my family watching TV, and my mom was in the kitchen, washing dishes while trying to chat with my dad. When Ivy saw me, she quickly called me over to sit down, acting as if we were old friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. "Ruby, you're here. Your dad just wanted to tell you that Justin, his business partner, is looking for a girlfriend. He wants you to meet him tomorrow." I thought for a moment. Justin? The real estate tycoon Justin? Isn't he married? My mom, who had just finished washing the dishes, didn't even wipe her hands. She immediately grabbed my hand and looked at me excitedly. "Ruby, which boss doesn't have a few mistresses? It's your lucky day that Justin has his eye on you. If you go out with him, your father's business will definitely reach a new level, and your brother will have a better future." When I heard her finally mention that child, as if suddenly thinking of something, I immediately pulled my mom to my dad and took out a paternity test. I hesitated for a moment and said, "Dad, there's something I don't know whether I should say." My dad turned to look at me. "What is it?" "Anything is fine, as long as you go out with Justin." My grandma also looked at me, glaring at me fiercely. Just say it. You're just a girl, and you don't know how to do anything. Our little treasure is much better than you, she said, kissing the child in her arms. I handed the document to my dad. It's just that the child you had with Ivy isn't biologically yours. After saying that, I stood behind my mom as if I were afraid. My dad glanced at me and immediately flipped through the document. Then he pushed Ivy away, who was clinging to him. Explain to me what's going on. Ivy knelt on the ground, her hands trembling. I love you too much. She didn't deny it at all. Sure enough, she knew the truth. When my grandma heard this news, she was furious and threw the child onto the sofa, slapping Ivy. You bitch, you dare to deceive me. I've been so good to you. At this moment, my mother rushed over and hugged the child as if it were a treasure. 11. Ivy wasn't giving up. She grabbed my dad's pants and begged, Caleb, please listen to my explanation. But my dad's face was dark as he kicked her in the face. You bitch. You've been cheating on me and made me raise another man's child. Mom, take her to the room, and we'll talk about this later. With that, my grandma dragged Ivy into the room. My mom watched this scene and seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. She turned to my dad and said, Caleb, why don't we adopt him? Look at him, he's so young, and our family just needs a boy. Grandma, who had already locked the door, rushed over upon hearing this and scolded my mom. Aren't you ashamed enough? It's because you can't give birth to a son that my son had to go out and find another woman to have one. And it turned out it wasn't even his. And now you want to adopt. You're going to ruin my reputation. My mom hugged the child and looked at my dad, her face darkening. She stammered, I'm sorry, Caleb. I'm useless. Grandma grabbed my mom's ear and shouted triumphantly, Hurry up and send the child away. It's bad luck. I think the widow at the end of our village can still have children. Why don't you let her have one? My dad frowned, and his mood turned sour. Mom, I'm a man of status. I'm not a pig that can breed with anyone. Grandma quickly slapped her forehead. Yes, I forgot about that. Why don't you divorce Elena and marry a college student? When my mom heard that my dad wanted a divorce, she immediately panicked. Caleb, if we divorce, Ruby's reputation will be ruined. What if Justin cares about that? Why don't you find someone else, and I'll take care of her? Hearing this, I was still shocked, even after everything that had happened. I couldn't believe my mom was so obsessed with love. I immediately pretended to be heartbroken and said, It's my fault for making bad friends and involving you all. But I know someone even better than Justin. My dad hesitated, but Justin has already agreed to everything. I looked at my mom and gestured towards the door behind us. She immediately understood. Since Ivy is willing to follow you, it doesn't matter who she's with. She might as well go with Justin. 12. My dad slapped his thigh and immediately decided to send Ivy to bed with President Justin that night, fearing that things would get worse if he waited. Seeing that my goal had been achieved, I found an excuse to go out. I watched as the direction of the live stream had completely reversed. People were sympathizing with me, saying that I was too weak because of my environment. They were also cursing my family, saying that my mother was mentally ill and obsessed with love, and that she should go see a doctor. I turned off my phone with satisfaction and went to sleep. A few days later, Ivy called me crying. Ruby, can you come pick me up? President Justin is a pervert. I can't take it anymore. Tell Nathan that I'm willing to get back together with him. Before she could finish, I heard that nightmare voice from last life. Who are you calling, sweetheart? How do you still have the energy to call? You're so wild in bed, but you're pretending to be innocent now. Let's see how I'm going to deal with you. Ivy said tremblingly. Don't come here. I was wrong. Help me, Ruby, save me. I smiled and said to the other end, I can't do anything about it. Why don't you ask my dad? After hanging up the phone, I felt refreshed. I saw on my phone that someone had actually dug up that my dad's company was suspected of illegal activities and might face imprisonment. I knew he hadn't been clean all these years, but I didn't expect him to be so illegal. While I was still thinking about it, my dad called me. Ruby, where are you? I want to see you. No. As soon as I finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. I frowned and opened the door, and it was actually my parents and grandma. What are you doing here? 13. My dad entered first and looked around the room. Where's your dad? You've gotten pretty bold, haven't you? My mom followed, pulling on my dad's sleeve with her head down. My grandma immediately slapped me. You little bitch, when did you buy this house? Did you steal the money from your dad? Now that you have money, you don't know how to respect me. You'll pass this house on to your future brother, got it? I covered my face and looked at them coldly. Why? My dad replied confidently. Because I'm your father. Your father is in trouble now. Sell this house and give me the money. Then you go marry President Sam and help me get through this. Dad, money can't solve the problems you've caused. Go to another city and start over with a new identity. My mom nodded in agreement. Yes, Ruby, a girl doesn't need a house anyway. You're going to get married eventually. Don't be so selfish. Why don't you just sell it and consider it helping your mom? I scoffed. You're all sick in the head, but I'm not. You say daughters are no good. Why don't you go and have a son? Am I missing a leg or an arm compared to a man? What can a man do that I can't? Have I ever asked you for anything all these years? Grandma quickly defended her. How dare you talk to your elders like that? Just answer me yes or no. No, I said firmly, word by word, with unwavering eyes. When my grandma heard this, she tried to hit me again, but I grabbed her hand and pushed her hard, and she fell to the ground. She looked at me in astonishment, and then she was about to start crying and making a scene. I smiled coldly. There's no audience here. It won't hurt, get up. My dad scolded. Ruby, I've raised you for so many years. Is this how you treat your elders? Yeah, you never really raised me. I nodded, then said, come in. 14. A group of police officers surrounded us. I stood behind the police and pointed at my dad. This is Caleb, the man you're looking for. He's also involved in human trafficking and prostitution. As my dad was being taken away, he glared at me viciously. Ruby, wait until I get out. I won't let you off easy. I smiled and nodded. I'll be waiting. You might never get out of prison for the crimes you've committed. My grandma watched this scene and screamed, My son, where are you taking my son? She then tried to rush over and hit me, but I dodged to the side. She hit the wall head-on and fainted. When she woke up in the hospital, she was mentally ill. Only my mom was left staring at me blankly. She collapsed on the ground, looking at me helplessly. Ruby, what am I going to do, Mom? Please give me back my husband. I opened my mouth to say something, but I couldn't. After all, she was my mother, and I still had some feelings for her. I sent her home and arranged for a nanny to look after her. Just when I thought everything was over, I found that people were starting to criticize me online again. I thought it was just people who hadn't gotten all the information, so I didn't pay much attention. But when I went to the park, I saw people whispering about me behind my back and turning away when they saw me. Even when I went to a restaurant, they told me I was not allowed to enter. I quickly checked the latest news on my mom's live stream account. It turned out that after she went back, she was still raising that child. But she was live streaming, saying that I had been fooling around outside, abandoned the child after giving birth, and that she had raised the child alone out of pity and bought milk powder with the money she earned from live streaming. She also said that I had been fooling around outside and had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. The internet started to sympathize with this kind of mother again. I turned around and posted the child's paternity test online for everyone to judge for themselves. Then I released my medical report, proving that I was healthy, and demanded that Ms. Elena apologize in a live broadcast. 15. Netizens watched this reversal and decided to wait and see, but some still engaged in moral kidnapping, saying, After all, she's your mother. She raised you for so many years, so why do you still want your mother to apologize? Wouldn't an explanation be enough? Upstairs, if my mother were like that, I would have cut ties with her a long time ago, let alone a public apology. She knows how much such public opinion can affect a woman. What could a mother have in mind other than wanting the best for her daughter? Don't be so conspiratorial. Seeing the increasingly heated online discussion, my mother called me. Ruby, if you want your mother to apologize, that's fine. Pass your house on to your brother as a legacy for Caleb's family, and give me 200,000 yuan, so I can support myself. First of all, I don't have that much. I've basically given everything I've earned over the years to the whole family, and secondly, he's nothing to me. How could I have raised a daughter like you? If your father doesn't come out, I'll follow your father. You'll just have to wait to become an orphan. I wouldn't mind at all. Soon, my father's verdict came down. Death penalty to be carried out immediately. The big stone in my heart finally landed, but someone called me and asked me to go to the rooftop. I went to the rooftop and saw my mother holding the child, crying with red and swollen eyes. Caleb, I'm sorry. I gave birth to a wicked daughter like Ruby. Wait for me. I'll be right there. And we can be a family of 3. I slowly approached her. Ms. Elena, don't be so excited. Come down first. What will happen to the child if you leave? When she saw me, she became even more agitated. It's all your fault. Why are you a girl? You couldn't keep your father's heart, and you let him go out and find other women all these years. And in the end, you even killed him. I stopped walking towards her. That was his own fault. It has nothing to do with me. Elena shook her head in despair. It's all your fault. You killed my husband. Since you like this place so much, I'll jump off the building here. And when the house price drops, you won't be able to sell it. 16. Before we could react, she jumped off the building with the child in her arms. I stared blankly at the spreading pool of blood on the ground below, and tears involuntarily rolled down my cheeks. Mom, let's not be mother and daughter in the next life. Let's just be strangers. I'm really tired. Later, after Elena passed away, I returned home to sort through her belongings and found a report in the corner. It turned out that my mother had contracted the same sexually transmitted disease from my father, and she knew she didn't have long to live. The child also had a congenital heart disease, which explained why she needed money so urgently. The drama on the rooftop was posted online, and the rumors were dispelled, and people began to sympathize with me. Interestingly, because of the live stream, it attracted a lot of curious viewers, and many internet celebrities came to check it out, making the property prices soar instead of dropping. Later, I buried my parents and the poor child together. I went to the cemetery and bowed deeply 3 times. I hope you too will be good people in your next life and stop harming others. This is the last time I'll come to see you. The grudges of the previous generation and this generation are now settled. I don't want to meet you again in the next life. Afterwards, I sold the apartment that originally belonged to me and donated the money to a charity fund that helps girls in rural areas. I hope every girl can have a bright future and have her own independent thoughts, instead of being suppressed by a patriarchal family like I was and not daring to resist. Finally, I packed my bags and went to another city to start a new life.